What does capturing Venezuela's dictator have to do with your medical records? Well, more than you'd think. Right now, the Pentagon is threatening to label Anthropic, the company behind Claude AI, and one of my favorite tools, as a national security risk. Not a Chinese company, not a Russian adversary, an American AI lab that simply said no to two things: mass surveillance of Americans and weapons that fire without a human in the loop. That's it, two guardrails. And the military's response? They're considering a designation normally reserved for foreign enemies, one that would force Amazon and Google and every major defense contractor to cut ties with Anthropic and almost do it overnight. Here's where it gets interesting for the rest of us. The Pentagon's argument is simple. We should be able to use AI for anything that's legal, and technically they're right. Current law allows the government to collect massive amounts of data on American citizens. What they couldn't do until now is actually process all of it. AI changes that equation completely. And if you think this is just a defense story, you're missing the bigger picture. The same gap between what's legal and what's possible is playing out right now with your health data. Let me share what's actually happening. The common story is that HIPAA protects your health information, but the reality is way more complicated. HIPAA was written in 1996, before machine learning, before cloud computing, before anyone imagined that AI could look at your anonymous medical records and figure out exactly who you are. Here's what researchers at NYU recently discovered. Even after removing all 18 HIPAA-required identifiers, think about your name, birth date, address, everything, AI could still identify patients with alarming accuracy. Applied to the U.S. population, their technique would expose roughly 800,000 people. The researchers put it bluntly. The vast majority of re-identification risk stems not from protected health information, but from the non-sensitive and medical content that we deem safe to share. In other words, the stuff we thought was safe. It isn't, after all. It's not just your records, it's your body itself. Researchers have shown that AI can reconstruct your face from an MRI scan with like 83, almost to 100% accuracy. Your chest x-ray functions essentially as a fingerprint, uniquely identifying you even after a decade after the original scan. And your voice? Companies now are extracting 12 million biomarkers from 1 minute of speech. Let that sink in. A telehealth call about a sensitive health issue, addiction treatment, mental health, HIV care, isn't just a conversation anymore. It's a biometric sample that can identify both who you are and what conditions you have. The Pentagon dispute makes this concrete. Right now, the government can legally collect publicly available information on Americans: social media posts, voter rolls, gun permits. Without AI, that data is mostly useful. It's just too much to process. But with AI like Claude, which sits on my desktop, suddenly you can cross-reference everything. You can flag people who match certain profiles. You can build dossiers at scale. Anthropic is saying even if this is technically legal, we don't want to enable it. The Pentagon is saying that's not your call to make. Now, here's where it gets uncomfortable. The same logic applies to health data. Current law says that removing 18 identifiers makes your medical records de-identified and safe to share. But AI doesn't care about legal definitions. It sees patterns. Consider what's already possible, like writing style fingerprinting. Government-funded programs can identify anonymous authors by their writing pattern. Imagine that applied to mental health forums, anonymous patient charts, and support groups. How about cross-referencing at scale? 99.98% of Americans can be re-identified using just 15 basic attributes. Clinical notes routinely contain far more than that. AI can now infer sensitive health information from non-medical data. Your purchasing patterns, your social media activity, your location data combined, they tell a health story. We tend to think about anonymous health conversations as private, but we're approaching a point where AI could analyze the semantic patterns in your language. It could cross-reference it with other text samples you've written publicly, and it could identify you anyway. It's hard to imagine today, but 5 years ago, reconstructing faces from MRI scans sounded like science fiction too. For healthcare, the stakes couldn't be higher. The HIPAA security rule hadn't seen major updates since 2003, over 20 years, until proposed legislation last December. The new rules are expected to take effect in 2026. But here's the problem. Those rules don't address the fundamental reality that AI has rendered traditional de-identification obsolete. Meanwhile, most consumer health apps and wearables, they're not covered by HIPAA at all. Fitbit, Apple Watch, or a Ring, the data can be legally shared, sold, or transferred to partners without your explicit permission. You may not have known that. AI health chatbots, same story. There's no federal regulatory body governing health information you provide directly to AI tools. We're in a window where this technology has advanced, but the rules haven't caught up. And the gap, a lot can happen. The Anthropic situation is a preview. On one side, a company saying there should be limits on what powerful technology enables, even if those uses are technically legal. On the other, an institution saying if it's legal, it should be allowed, full stop. Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei laid out 4 warnings about how governments could misuse AI: mass surveillance, algorithmic propaganda, autonomous weapons, and AI for strategic decision making that concentrates power in maybe too few hands. His argument: we should use AI for national defense in all ways, except those which would make us more like our autocratic adversaries. And that's a philosophical position, and it's one that applies far beyond defense. The question isn't whether AI can identify you from anonymized health data. It can. The question is, what rules should govern this capability? Who gets to decide, and what happens in the meantime? I'm going to be honest with you. There's no clean answer here. The Pentagon has legitimate arguments. They operate in life or death situations where seconds matter. If AI tools won't cooperate in critical moments, that's a real problem. But Anthropic has a point too. Laws written for pre-AI era, they don't contemplate what's now possible. Mass surveillance was impractical when you needed humans to review everything, all that data. Now it's not. The same is true for health data. HIPAA's 18 identifier approach made sense when removing that information actually protected people. Today, researchers can re-identify patients from clinical content alone: the symptoms described, the treatment patterns, the writing style. For the rest of us, the takeaway is this: the rules you think protect you probably don't, not because anyone is breaking them, but because the technology has moved faster than anyone anticipated. The Pentagon-Anthropic standoff will resolve one way or another. Either Anthropic caves and loses its reputation as the safety-first AI lab, or they hold firm and get designated a supply chain risk, forcing massive disruption across technology. Or some compromise emerges, which is probably what will happen. Or this becomes a legal battle, which is very common today, and finally updates all the rules. What won't happen is the status quo holding. The gap between what's legal and what's possible has become too large to ignore. For healthcare, the same reckoning is coming. The question is whether we'll update the rules proactively, or we're going to wait until a major privacy breach forces the issues. In the meantime, assume your health data is less protected than you think. Not because of malice, but because the technology has outpaced the guardrails. That's the story that connects Venezuela to your next telehealth appointment. The rules haven't caught up to the technology, and until they do, we're all navigating a gap. If this was useful, subscribe for more on AI strategy and what's actually happening beneath the headlines. I'll see you on the next one.